Chapter 1. The Triumvirate Stirs. Twilight bathed the high towers of Atherin in soft violet and gold. The castle, rebuilt from stone scorched by war, stood not as a monument to what was lost, but as a promise of what might rise again. At its heart, in the Hall of Accord, 3 sisters sat beneath the vaulted ceiling carved with stars. Lysandra, the youngest, sat in the central seat. Her armour was simple, burnished leather reinforced with hidden steel, and a black cloak draped from her shoulders like shadow. No crown adorned her brow, only the quiet authority of one who'd bled for her people. She had ruled from the ruins and walked among the citizens as they rebuilt. A ghost in alleys, a flame in the dark, beloved by those who saw her not as royalty, but as their own. To her right, Nezra lounged like a resting predator. Her armour was heavier, bone-plated and painted with the ochres of the old earth. She wore a bracer etched with the sigils of land-bound creatures, basilisks, drakes, hounds that bowed to no master but her. Of the 3, she was the fiercest in combat and least fond of diplomacy. Her loyalty ran deep, but so did her temper. To the left, Valara sat in stillness. Her robes moved as if stirred by wind only she could feel. Pale silver eyes watched the others with unreadable calm, and her voice, when she chose to use it, could stop storms or summon them. Her dominion was over the skies and the winged things that roamed them. Valara did not command by volume, but by gravity. A silence hung over the table, thick with expectation. Then the scout stepped forward. "My lady queens, there is movement in the north. A gathering, dark in origin. We've seen shadow beasts forming in numbers, not seen since your father's fall." All 3 sisters reacted, but differently. Nezra stood first, fists clenched. "Then we ride. I'll rally the stone beasts and raise their nests before they draw breath." Valara tilted her head, considering. "Their gathering may be symbolic, a ritual, or bait." Lysandra's gaze remained locked on the map. Her voice, when it came, was low. "And still we face it, alone." Nezra scoffed. "We do not need to stand alone. Call the pack. Gunnar has answered before." "I know," Lysandra said quietly. She stood now, circling the table slowly, hands clasped behind her back. "I remember when he helped us take back the castle, when he and Darren fought through fire and ruin without ever asking what was in it for them. I remember Ultranacious falling beneath a human's blade." Her fingers brushed the hilt at her side, a slender silver dagger etched with celestial runes, its blade forged in Alfheim, its edge quenched in blood and starlight. Gunnar had given it to her the night she came to return it in Alfheim. "It's yours now," he'd said, pressing it into her hand. "You carry this now, not to remember me, but to remember that you can finish the fight." It wasn't just a weapon, it was a vow. A quiet torch passed between warriors. She wasn't the only one who carried a piece of him. Around each sister's neck hung a different talisman, 3 fragments of the wolf's crest, carved from old bone and bound in silver wire. A gift from Gunnar after the reclamation of Atherin. Each one linked to him, attuned to their bearer. If they ever needed him, truly needed him, he would come. But not for every storm. Not this time, but this is our realm, our burden. If we cannot hold it together with the strength of our bond, we have no right to rule. Valara's eyes narrowed. "You'd risk lives for pride." Lysandra turned to face her. "Number, I'll risk them for sovereignty." Nezra paced, jaw tight. "You'd wait until they breach our gates before asking for aid?" "I said we face it," Lysandra replied. "I never said we face it blind. Send the hawks. But don't send a call for help. Not yet." The silence returned, but now it pulsed with tension. At last Valara exhaled. "Very well. I'll send my watchers, and if what they find is what I suspect, We will call him. Lysandra nodded once. Agreed. And from the high windows 3 shadows stretched across Atherin, land, sky and flame, poised to either stand alone or burn together. Chapter 2. Through the Forgotten Gate. The winds howled across the withered hollow, carrying whispers that had never known a voice. A circle of stone half buried in moss and ash stood crooked in a sunken glade, an ancient portal long lost to memory. Cracked runes flickered faintly now, pulsing with an unnatural heartbeat. Something had awakened it, a hiss of air, a rip in space. And through the shattered ring, Syrien stepped into Atherin. She wore a tattered cloak the colour of dried blood, wrapped around leathers scorched by past battles and stained by madness. Her eyes shimmered with fractured light, part silver, part void, and her lips moved even before she spoke, as if she were finishing a conversation no one else could hear. "No, no, he doesn't see it yet," she whispered to the empty air. Then louder, "But he will." Behind her, the spectre wolf emerged, silent and ghost-like, its form rippled, flesh and spirit tangled together. A warped echo of the great wolves of the pack, but darker, wrong. Its eyes glowed with a hungry blue light, and every step left frost blooming in the dead grass. Syrien looked back at it with something like affection, or reverence, or both. "You followed me through the gate," she said, "like a good shadow, loyal, faithful." She crouched beside him, stroking its fur, coarse and insubstantial like smoke made solid. "I had a name once. It meant something, Syrien. But they never understood what I was." She leaned in close to the wolf's ear. "What are you? Are you Alpha's mirror? A mistake? No, not a mistake. You're mine now. You were made from pain, like me." The wolf didn't flinch, didn't growl. It just met her gaze with cold stillness. "Then we'll name you, won't we?" she said softly, placing her forehead to his. "Sorvyn." The name echoed through the hollow. The portal behind them sparked and died. Syrien stood lifting her arms toward the twilight sky. Her voice rose in manic glee. "Do you feel it, Sorvyn? The scent of old power? This realm buried my master, but it still stinks of his bones. We'll dig them up and burn what's left." The wolf growled, low and rumbling, not at her, at the wind. Something had noticed their arrival. Syrien stalked through the twisted underbrush, Sorvyn gliding silently beside her like a shadow unmoored from flesh. The trees here were half dead, branches drooping like nooses, their bark stained black by centuries of cursed storms. She stopped. Sorvyn raised his head, and then they heard it. Laughter. Guttural, cruel, echoing from the nearby ridge. 5 figures emerged from the tree line, humanoid in shape but wrong in every other way. Their skin cracked and veined with shadow, eyes glowing like burning embers, their armor cobbled together from bone and rusted steel. One dragged a dying beast behind him, some kind of corrupted stag, still twitching. "Another traveller?" one sneered, raising a jagged axe. "Looks like this one brought her mutt." The others chuckled and fanned out to encircle her. Syrien said nothing. She just smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind that made men question whether they'd just stepped into something ancient and cruel. Her hands drifted to her sides. No weapon, just the twitch of fingers ready to tear. The lead raider stepped forward. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't be alone in the dark." Syrien tilted her head. "I'm not," she whispered. And Sorvyn moved. One blink he was beside her. The next, he was in the raider's chest, spectral jaws snapping through bone and soul. The man didn't even scream. His body simply collapsed, ice crackling along his armor as if time itself had frozen inside his lungs. The others roared and charged. Syrien didn't flinch. She danced between them, laughter spilling from her mouth in ragged delight. One swung wide. Her hand caught his wrist, and with a flex of shadow-wrapped fingers, his bones shattered like glass. She turned, ducked under a blade, and drove her fingers into a second raider's face, pulling something unseen, his essence, his memory, ripping it out in strands of pale light. 2 more remained. Sorvyn leapt over Syrien like a wraith, his claws dragging across one's throat in a single beautiful arc of death. The last tried to run. Syrien appeared in front of him. Just appeared. He fell backward, crawling, shaking, bleeding from a dozen shallow cuts she'd left without touching him. Ah, she crooned, crouching. I need someone to tell me where the rot's spreading, and look at you, such strong lungs left for screaming. She gestured lazily, and shadow tendrils slithered up from the ground to bind the survivor's limbs, pulling him upright like a puppet on frayed strings. Sorvyn circled him slowly, growling low and guttural, steam curling from his jaws. Syrien leaned in close, her voice a whisper at the edge of madness. Let's talk about the dark little worm, where it nests, who feeds it, and how many bones I have to break before you remember everything. She giggled, then froze, eyes widening, head tilting. Oh, he's listening again, she whispered, touching her temple. The captive's screams faltered, turning to ragged sobs. Blood dripped from his wrists where the shadow bonds held him. His eyes darted toward the wolf, then to the woman. Then she said the name. Ultranacious wants to know too. The clearing went still. Even Sorvyn stopped circling. The captive's face contorted in confusion. What? He gasped. He's dead. Syrian's head twitched. A pause. Then laughter. Sharp, manic, peeling out of her like glass breaking in her throat. Oh, honey, she purred, wiping a tear from her cheek with a bloodied thumb. Dead is just a word. One of many. He's here. She tapped her temple. He's always been here. She walked in a slow circle, her eyes distant, arguing with someone who wasn't there. Number, don't start again. I let you speak last time. A beat, her face twisted. Yes, you chose me, I know. Another beat. Oh, stop sulking. You lost. He beat you. You died like a goddamn joke. She paused mid-step, trembling, as if the air pushed back. Then her eyes snapped to the captive, wide and glowing. You said his name. The man shrank under her gaze. What? Who? I didn't mean... Gunner. Her voice was a rasp. Not hers. Not just hers. The air pulsed. The shadows around her twitched. She stepped closer, smiling like a broken marionette. You're right, she whispered. He did kill him. Ripped the last breath from Ultranacious like a wolf tearing meat from bone. My wolf. Her face crumpled into fury. My king. A scream burst from her throat, not at the man, but at the sky itself. Sorvyn howled beside her, his call echoing in unnatural, overlapping tones. 1 wolf, 100 voices. Then Syrien dropped to her knees in front of the captive. Face to face. Do you want to know the part they left out? She whispered. The part he never understood. She leaned closer, lips brushing his ear. The king doesn't die. He moves. Her hand gripped the man's jaw. He whimpered. The shadows around her began to writhe. Then she froze again, head tilting, listening. No, she said suddenly, shaking her head. No, not yet. This one talks. Don't waste it. We need it. She looked at the man again, all sweetness and knives. You're my little message now. Aren't you lucky? The shadows retreated just slightly, leaving the man sobbing in terror. Sorvyn sat at her side, still as death. The captive, shaking and pale, spilled everything. How the remnants of the old faith, worshippers of Ultranacious, had retreated to the frostwood barrens in the far north. How they were gathering again under whispers of resurrection. How they'd lost contact with the Black Dawn, but still believed the king's return was prophesied. Syrien listened intently, eyes wide, nodding as if she were hearing a bedtime story. Oh, she cooed when he finished. You've been very helpful. So many secrets in that little skull. She reached out gently, brushing a curl of hair from his bloodied forehead. Now, what shall we do with you? The man tensed, expecting more pain. But Syrien just smiled and, strangely, sighed. Number no more screaming. That was yesterday's song. She stood and waved a dismissive hand. Go! Shoo! You've earned your freedom! He blinked, stunned. What? She was already turning away. I said run along, pet, before I change my mind. The man didn't wait. He staggered up and bolted into the woods, tripping over roots, crashing through branches. Every ounce of instinct screamed at him to not look back. Syrien watched him go. Her smile softened, her hands clasped behind her back. She swayed a little in place like a girl humming to herself in a flower field. Then, her face twitched. Oh, fine, she snapped at the air, if you're going to sulk about it. She sighed dramatically, then called out sweetly. Wait! The man didn't even hear her before Sorvyn moved. One blink, he was there, one breath, and the man wasn't. Just a scream, cut short by the crunch of bone and the whisper of frost. Syrien shrugged, wiping imaginary dust from her palms. Can't have him tattling to the pretty sisters now, can we? She turned toward the north, voice low and gleaming. Come along, Sorvyn. Let's find the children who still believe Daddy's coming home. Chapter 3. The Road of Ash and Praise. The sun dipped low over the ravaged trail, casting long shadows across the scorched ridgeline. Nezra rode alone now, having dismissed her forward scouts. She didn't need them for this stretch. These lands knew her. The ruined stones, the ironwood trees, the scent of old war and smoke. They were part of her legacy. She was almost home. Her war horses had been sent ahead to prepare the stronghold. She preferred to walk the last mile, sword on her back, cloak stiff with dried blood. The reports from the north were dire. She would need every soldier, every weapon, every ounce of will to hold the line if the darkness rose again. She didn't expect to find someone already waiting. A figure stood in the road ahead, silhouetted by twilight. Cloaked, hooded, unmoving. No weapons drawn, no banners flown. Nezra slowed. Identify yourself. The woman did not speak right away. Instead, she bowed. A perfect, elegant bow, one of respect, not submission. When she finally lifted her head, the hood fell back, eyes like stormlight, a smile too soft for a battlefield. Nezra of Atharin, she said, voice calm, almost reverent. The only one who still walks her father's path. Nezra's grip on her hilt tightened. Speak plainly, stranger. You're trespassing on sovereign land. I know, the woman said, stepping forward slowly. I chose this place because it belongs to you, not to them. That gave Nezra pause. Them? The woman tilted her head. Your sisters, the diplomat and the dreamer. They speak of peace, of politics, but you prepare for war. You carry the burden. You always have. Nezra frowned. You know much for a trespasser. I knew your father. That stopped Nezra cold. The woman's eyes didn't waver. I walked beside Ultranacious. I saw his vision for this world. And I see you now. And I wonder if that fire in your blood is wasted under the weight of compromise. Nezra took a step forward. You speak as though you admire him. I do. And so did you. Once. Nezra's jaw flexed. Her silence was all the answer needed. The woman smiled, not unkindly. You are the blade of Atharin, Nezra. And blades do not bend. They cut. She bowed again, this time lower. I only came to see you with my own eyes, to know if the rumours were true. What rumours? Nezra demanded. That there is still one queen left in this realm, worthy of her father's crown. The compliment landed like a blow. Nezra's breath caught, but she showed nothing. The woman began to turn away, cloak trailing behind her. I'll leave you to your preparations, Commander. War is coming. Some will face it with words, others with will. She paused just for a moment. And if ever you wish to speak again, look to the north. The wind carries truth there. Then she was gone, vanishing into the trees like she had never been there at all. Nezra stood alone on the road, pulse racing. She would tell no one of the encounter. But that night, she would dream of a throne not shared. Chapter 4. The Whispering Hollow. The castle of high winds crowned the cliffs beyond, its towers shrouded in early mist. Valara moved with purpose through the silver forest at its base, her cloak trailing like smoke. The air here was always colder, wiser. Her connection to the currents, to the voices carried upon them, was strongest in these woods. She paused beside the hollow tree where the wind always bent in a spiral, no matter the season. A childhood haunt. A place where the breeze once carried her father's commands like thunder. But today, the wind felt off. It wasn't warning her. It was calling, a voice just behind her. You still listen. Valara turned calmly, not startled. She had sensed the approach, but the woman who stepped out from behind the frost-veiled birch wasn't one she recognized. And yet, there was something ancient in her bearing, something familiar in her posture, in the way the mist curled around her as though recognizing its kin. Most don't hear the wind anymore, the stranger said softly. But you always did, didn't you, daughter of storms? Valara narrowed her eyes. Who are you? The woman tilted her head, offering no name. I heard your voice once, she said instead. Long ago, when your father still walked this world, you spoke his name not with fear, but with understanding. Valara didn't speak, but her stance shifted. I was there, the woman continued, in the shadow of his throne, when you refused his wrath, when you stood in silence while others screamed. He admired that. Valara raised a brow. You speak of him as if he still watches. Oh, he does, the woman whispered, stepping into a shaft of moonlight, not from above, but through us. In dreams, in instinct, in those quiet moments between breaths when your sisters hesitate and you act. Valara stared at her. The stranger smiled faintly. Do you ever feel it? The tug in your blood? That knowing? She placed a hand over her own chest. I do. And it led me here. To you. And what is it you want? Valara asked, voice wind-smooth. Nothing, the woman said. Not yet. Only to remind you. She stepped closer, her breath visible in the cool air. You were always the one who listened best. The wind rose suddenly around them, high, circling, curious. Valara's cloak snapped like a banner, but when she turned her head for only a second. The stranger was gone. The wind dropped to a hush. Valara stood alone in the glade, heart steady, thoughts not. Far above, her castle waited. The sky was quiet, but she couldn't shake the sensation that she had just spoken to a ghost, one that wasn't done with her yet. She placed her palm against the hollow tree where the breeze still spiraled, and whispered, Father? The wind answered nothing. Chapter 5. Ghosts in the Throne Hall. The obsidian keep no longer echoed with screams. Its new queen had seen to that. Lysandra stood in the great hall, eyes on the banners she'd raised, the ones sewn by her people, not her father's priests. This was no longer a fortress of fear. It was a place of counsel, healing, which is why the voice from the shadows unnerved her. You've done beautiful work, truly. A woman emerged from the columns. She wore no armor, no crown, just flowing dark silks and a calm expression that didn't match the sharpness in her eyes. Lysandra kept her tone neutral. You're trespassing. I had to see it, the woman said. The place where hope grew out of horror. I mean you no harm. Lysandra didn't relax. Who are you? The woman bowed, not mockingly, but with strange reverence. I am called Syrien. I served your father in a past life. That gave Lysandra pause, but only for a breath. My father had many servants, she said. Most are dead or hiding. Syrien smiled faintly. And a few are watching, wondering, hoping your rule might succeed where his failed. Lysandra frowned. You expect me to believe you came here to offer well wishes? No, Syrien said softly. Only perspective. She looked around the hall. I've spoken with your sisters. That caught Lysandra's attention. Syrien continued carefully. They love you, fiercely. But love is not unity. Nezra is frustrated. She prepares for war with no clear enemy. Velara, she listens to voices no one else can hear, and both of them fear disappointing you. Lysandra's eyes narrowed. They told you this? They didn't need to, Syrien said. I felt it before, in courtrooms, in battlefields, when strong women walk beside one another, but not always in the same direction. She stepped back, not closer, gave space. I only wanted to say, don't take their silence for loyalty, and don't take mine for threat. Lysandra didn't move, didn't blink. If you ever doubt them, Syrien said, voice a whisper now, remember who carries the dagger. She bowed once more, gracefully, not theatrically, and walked toward the archway. You don't have to trust me, she added over her shoulder, but one day soon you'll want to know who does. And then she was gone. Chapter 6. The Voice in the Fire. The winds in the northern blight didn't howl. They whispered, low, hungry, wrong. Ash curled in the air like old parchment set to burn. The land was dead, long dead. But something still pulsed beneath the cracked earth, like a heartbeat stitched into stone. Syrien walked barefoot through it, her steps leaving no mark. Her dress, tattered and regal, moved as if underwater. Behind her Sorvyn prowled, a beast of smoke and jagged light, his maw dripping embers, his gaze locked forward with a predator's certainty. They had come to the last altar of Ultranacious, the black spire, and the faithful had gathered. More than 24 figures stood in the ruins, hooded, masked, broken in body but not belief. Some had carved his runes into their flesh. Others wore necklaces made from the teeth of those they'd sacrificed. Warlocks, exiles, fanatics. They watched her approach like wolves watch fire, drawn and terrified, and not a single one bowed. Who dares wear his shadow? One demanded. A massive brute with a leather mask sewn into his skin, voice like crushed stone. Syrien stopped, tilted her head, said nothing. Another cultist spat. The wolf of earth shattered the throne. We follow no whore bearing ghosts. Still no reaction. Then, from behind them, a whisper, a child's voice, sweet and delicate. That wasn't very nice. They turned. It wasn't Syrien who spoke. It was inside them, behind their eyes. Their fire pit erupted, green and violet flame coiling upward like screaming vines. Syrien raised one hand, eyes rolling white, and then he spoke. My children forgot the sound of my voice. The words didn't echo. They shuddered through the bones of every living thing. Spines cracked, knees buckled. One of the cultists collapsed, blood pouring from her nose and ears. You lost your faith. Now I speak again. Syrien's body arched, arms flung wide, head thrown back, jaw distended just slightly too far. Her voice was too, layered, warped, like a scream caught between dimensions. Sorvyn growled, not out of fear, but reverence. One cultist tried to run. Sorvyn was faster. His jaws didn't just crush, the man burned from within, shrieking as violet flame burst from his eyes and mouth. The others, frozen. Ultranacious kept speaking, through her, around her. Kneel, or burn like the rest? Another man fell to his knees, then another, and another. until only the brute remained. He raised a blade, screaming, "You're not him!" Syrien stepped forward, suddenly calm, human again, smiling. She touched his chest with a single finger, and he rotted. His armor turned to rust, his flesh bubbled, blackened, peeled away in strips. He didn't even scream, his lungs decayed before he could. When he hit the ground, his bones were ash. Syrien looked to the rest. "Do I have your attention?" They all knelt, not in worship, in absolute whimpering terror. She turned to Sorvyn and whispered, not to him, but to something only she heard. "Yes." I think that was enough. She looked to the altar and smiled wider. "Now, let's talk about vengeance." The wolf who ended the king still breathes. Syrien turned toward the altar, her voice like silk over razors. Let's remind him what it means to make a god bleed. Chapter 7. Fractures and Formalities. The Grand Hall of Atherin's triumvirate citadel had been reforged from ruin. Where once Ultranacious's throne loomed over a pit of flame, now a raised dais held 3 seats, equal in height, spaced equidistant. The symbol of their rule, unity forged from shadow. But today, the air crackled. Valara arrived first, barefoot, her hair swept by winds no one else could feel. She stood beneath the mosaic ceiling, lips parted slightly, eyes distant. She was listening. Nezra entered next in full-plated war armor fresh from the march. Her blade clanked against the stone floor as she walked, each step deliberate. Last came Lysandra, calm, composed, her dark cloak bearing the silver thread of the people's seal. She gave no nod, no greeting, just moved to her seat and waited. Moments passed in silence. "You felt it too," Valara finally said, voice soft. "The pull?" Nezra asked. "The dread? The thing scratching at the edge of your thoughts?" Valara nodded. "It's whispering, but I can't hear the words." Lysandra's gaze narrowed. "Something is shifting in the north. I've heard reports. Shadows moving. Old followers of our father stirring." She looked at her sisters, searching. "Anything you wish to share?" "The seed test begins." Nezra shifted in her seat. "I had a visitor," she said, folding her arms. "A woman. Said things I didn't care to hear." "Syrien?" Valara asked, turning to her sharply. Nezra's eyes narrowed. "So she spoke to you, too." "She claimed we didn't trust each other," Valara said. "Told me. I was the only one who truly understood what our father was." Lysandra's voice remained quiet, but her tone hardened. "She visited me as well. She said you both had shared doubts about each other." The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was sharp. "Liar!" Nezra growled. "Or very clever," Valara added. Lysandra leaned forward, hands clasped. "Either way, she's trying to fracture us, and the question is, did she succeed?" The tension is now palpable. Each sister has heard a version of the truth twisted just enough to raise questions. Nezra's pride is bruised. Valara's intuition is rattled. Lysandra's trust is stretched. They won't declare war on each other, but the unity has shifted, and Syrien from afar will feel the tremor like a lover's whisper. Chapter 8. Mother of the End. The torches in the grand hall flickered and died. A violet flame roared from the fire pit at the chamber's centre. It was unnatural, wrong. It swirled like ink in water, hissing and cracking. Then, from that flame stepped Syrien. Not cloaked in shadow, not hiding, radiant, twisted, triumphant. She wore a gown the colour of bruised night, trailing embers with each step. Her dark hair flowed like liquid obsidian, adorned with a single silver circlet. Not a crown, but something older. Something claimed. And beside her came Sorvyn, the spectre wolf. His body rippled like a mirage of smoke and bone, eyes lit with otherworldly flame. He did not growl. He simply watched. The sisters rose as one. Nezra's sword was out. Valara's arms lifted in warning. Lysandra stood with one hand on the dagger at her waist. Syrien beamed like a mother greeting wayward children. "Well, this is cozy, just missing a fire and some wine." "You dare return here?" Lysandra snapped. "You were cast out by our people. You're no queen." "Oh, darling," Syrien purred. "You may have worn the titles, but I wore the man." The silence that followed was violent. Nezra recoiled in disgust. Valara blinked, stunned. Lysandra went still as stone. Syrien stepped forward, trailing shadow and light. Ultranacious chose me. Not as his weapon, not as his pawn, as his consort. While you three quarrelled over scraps of power, he whispered truths to me in the dark. He gave me purpose. He gave me... She turned, eyes gleaming. "A son." Valara gasped. "Lies," Nezra hissed. "I bore him in flame and pain and prophecy," Syrien said, voice rising, eyes wide. "And when your precious pack and its one-eyed pet wolf murdered him, burned him, I held what remained. I raised his legacy." Sorvyn stepped forward. The shadows shifted like wings at his back. Syrien grinned. "Your little brother says hi." Valara shook her head. "He's no brother of mine." "No," Syrien said with a cruel smile, "because he's more—" The sisters moved. Magic flared. Steel flashed. "And Syrien." She spun in a slow circle, eyes rolling. "Oh, come on, again with the drama," she whined. Then she stopped, eyes fixed upward. "No, I don't want to kill them yet. Number, stop yelling. Gods, you're so controlling." She pouted like a scolded child, turning away from the sisters to have a full-blown meltdown. "Yes, I know. They're important. Blah, blah, fate. We talked about this, remember? You said—" She paused, eyes wide. "Number, don't say that. Don't you dare say that." She turned back to the sisters, suddenly smiling again. "Looks like you're in luck," she said sweetly. "Daddy still loves you, and I still obey. Sometimes." With a snap of her fingers, the violet flame swirled again. Sorvyn growled, a low, amused sound. "But this," Syrien said, pointing to the chamber, "this charade ends soon. The realm will bleed. And when it does, my son will wear the crown your father never finished forging." She met Lysandra's eyes, then Valara's, then Nezra's. "Your reign is ending, girls. Mommy's home." And with that, she vanished. Only the echo of her laughter remained, bright and broken, fading into ash. Chapter 9. The Dagger's Echo. The grand hall was silent again, but this time it was not peace. It was the silence of aftermath, of fury choking on restraint. Valara knelt beside the scorched mark where Syrien had vanished. Her fingertips hovered just above it, catching faint wisps of residual magic. "She wasn't lying," she whispered. Lysandra stood at the dais, one hand clenched around the starlight dagger. It still shimmered faintly, its runes pulsing not with warning but recognition. It had tasted Ultranacious's blood once before. Nezra paced like a caged predator, blade still unsheathed. She mocks us, walks into our home like she owns it, brags of that thing she bore, and then walks away. She slammed her fist against a marble column. It cracked. "We should have struck when we had the chance." "No," Lysandra said sharply. "We weren't ready. That was never a battle. We were never meant to win it today." "Then what do we do?" Valara asked. Her voice was calm, but her eyes burned with stormlight. Lysandra looked down at the dagger in her hand. The silver felt heavy, heavier than when Gunnar had given it to her. He had pressed it into her palm after the battle with Ultranacious, after the sky bled and the world shifted. "If this dagger glows," he had said, "don't hesitate. Call me." Now it pulsed, soft, rhythmic, like a heartbeat waiting for its other half. She reached into her cloak and drew out her talisman, a small medallion etched with the mark of the pack. Nezra and Valara followed, each pulling theirs from beneath armour or folds of cloth. 3 tokens, 3 signals, 1 purpose. Lysandra's voice was quiet. We're not calling him to save us. We're calling him because he's family. And because Syrians made it personal. Valara nodded, and Nezra, grudgingly, lowered her blade. The talismans flared one by one as each sister activated the enchantment Eli and Gunnar had built into them. Across realms, the signal pulsed like a flare, undeniable, untraceable except to one man. Meanwhile, in the workshop's secure portal chamber, alarms lit up across the console. Eli blinked. Gunnar, she called into the comm. You need to see this. He appeared in the doorway seconds later, one cybernetic hand flexing. Which one? He asked. Eli looked up. All three. A beat passed, and then Gunnar nodded once. Prep the portal. I'm going back to Atherin. Chapter 10. Whispers over the bluff. The wind was cruel up here, sharp, cold, and unrelenting. It whipped Syrien's long black coat around her as she stood at the edge of the bluff, overlooking the distant silhouette of the sisters' citadel below. A faint shimmer of warding spells rippled across the outer towers. Elegant, defensive, predictable. Syrien's smile curled as she watched the flickers of movement, sentries changing shifts, war banners being raised, a faint shimmer of magical communication flaring between towers. Look at them, she said softly, eyes glowing in the twilight haze. Scattering like ants because one little secret shook their pretty little crowns. She tilted her head as if listening, then giggled. No, not yet. Let them prepare. Let them feel safe. Behind her, Sorvyn emerged from the tree line. His form shifted slightly with every step, more shadow than flesh. He lowered his head beside hers, eyes glowing like twin moons. And below, across the valley, a small camp of 60 followers stirred restlessly in the dark. Some were former Black Dawn, others wanderers and zealots. All of them whispered Syrien's name like a prayer or a warning. She didn't look back. They'll die screaming, she said, and they'll think it's for me. Isn't that just divine? A gust of wind swept her hair across her face. She didn't move to push it back. They think it's about control, about ruling. But I don't want a throne, love. She tilted her face upward, talking to no one, or to someone only she could hear. You never cared for thrones either, did you? A pause. Then her voice changed, mocking, resentful. You said I was chaos incarnate. You said I was fire without form. But now you want revenge. Her tone sharpened. You're a god, and I'm your widow, your chosen. And that wolf, he took everything. Her hands clenched into fists. He gets to limp away with half a soul and a shiny silver arm. And I get left with the boy? She spun, pacing the edge of the cliff, barefoot now, the earth blackened where she stepped. Sorvyn growled low. You're right, she hissed suddenly. It's time. She faced the camp below. 60 is enough. We don't need a siege. We need a scream. She raised her voice. Send them. March them to the gates. Tell them to burn, to bleed, to beg for entry. Tell them we bring them peace. Her voice dropped again, almost a whisper. And when Gunnar comes to be the hero, we take him. A long pause. She smiled, lips curling into a predator's grin. He'll come for them. He always does. Let's see how much of that silver is left when I tear out his heart. She looked down at Sorvyn. And if the sisters die in the chaos? She shrugged. Oops. Chapter 11. The castle burns. The winds of Atherin blew colder than they had in weeks. Not from weather, but from something else. Something creeping beneath the stone, stirring ancient bones. From atop the battlements of the citadel, Valara narrowed her eyes. Storms shifting. No storm, Nezra muttered beside her. Not yet. Below them, across the cracked plains, a line of figures stumbled toward the gate. Dozens of them, filthy, bloodied, limping, their hands raised in surrender. Women, men, even a few children. They dragged broken banners behind them, flags once carried by Ultranacious's shattered regime, now torn and smeared with ash. "Refugees," said Lysandra quietly, appearing behind them. Her voice bore the same hesitation that lingered in the wind. Nezra didn't hesitate. Or bait. "They're unarmed," Lysandra argued. "Look at them, barely standing. That's what they want us to see." But the gates were already beginning to open. Lysandra had given the order. Inside the walls. The survivors were ushered in. Valara sent down breezes to carry warmth, Nezra posted guards at every corridor, and Lysandra personally walked among them, checking wounds, offering food. She touched a boy's shoulder gently and asked his name. "Devik," he whispered. "You're safe now," she promised. Devik smiled, and then he slit her wrist. The betrayal. Everything happened at once. Dozens of refugees dropped to the ground, hands sweeping up blades from hidden folds, teeth snapped open. Some weren't human. One woman burst into flame, laughing as she threw herself against a guard, exploding in a plume of enchanted fire. "To the shadows!" screamed one. "For the heir!" cried another. Lysandra clutched her bleeding arm and shouted, "To arms!" But the courtyard was already drowned in chaos. Nezra was the first to draw blood, cleaving through two attackers with her great blade, roaring like a storm unchained. Blood sprayed her armor. She didn't care. Valara took to the air, calling winds that hurled cultists across the stones, smashing them into pillars, scattering their ranks, but more poured in from side gates. There were more. Enter the Queen of Madness. A door near the central hall swung open, slowly, too slowly. And then, Syrien stepped through, hair pinned back in braids laced with bone, a long coat flowing behind her like spilled ink, and at her side, Sorvyn, moving like a wraith, his eyes glowing with the same inner storm as hers. The fighting paused for a breath. Syrien smiled like she owned the place. "My darlings," she said to the sisters, "what a mess you've made of Daddy's house." She turned, casually ran a blade through a wounded guard trying to crawl away, and continued on, unhindered. Sorvyn stalked behind her like death's echo. "Kill her!" Nezra bellowed, and charged. Syrien met her head-on. They clashed with a violence that shook the courtyard, steel against sorcery, fury against finesse. Nezra's strength was unmatched, but Syrien danced through it like she was born in chaos. Every swing Nezra made, Syrien twisted around. Every blow she took, she laughed, blood streaming down her cheek, her eyes wild. "You're just like him," Syrien hissed mid-swing. "All muscle, no mind." Nezra screamed and caught Syrien across the ribs. But Syrien didn't fall. She leaned in close, her lips by Nezra's ear. He hit harder. She unleashed a blast of dark flame at point-blank range. Nezra went down. The others fall. Valara's wind spells began to flicker. The air choked with ash, with corrupted energy. She tried to fly, but Sorvyn caught her, dragging her from the sky mid-incantation and slamming her into the stone. Lysandra fought her way toward the vault door, blood soaking her bandaged wrist, using traps and shadowed corridors to outmaneuver the cultists. But Syrien was already waiting at the final hall. She held up the starlight dagger, now glowing faintly in her hand. "Looking for this?" Syrien asked, tilting her head. "He gave it to you, didn't he? So romantic." Lysandra charged anyway. It wasn't enough. Captured. Chains. Magic-dampening manacles. Rings of black stone pressed to their skin, cutting off their powers. One by one, the sisters were dragged into the lower dungeons, the same ones Ultranacious once used to break kings. Syrien's throne. She sat atop the old throne, Ultranacious's throne, legs crossed, blood on her hands, 3 talismans around her neck, and the starlight dagger resting across her lap. Sorvyn sat at the base of the stairs like a loyal executioner, his claws still wet. Cultists knelt all around. Syrien smiled at the corpse-littered hall. "We'll tidy up later," she said to no one in particular. She looked at the dagger, then toward the sealed portal chamber. He'll come. He always does. And somewhere in the blackness, the voice of Ultranacious whispered back, "Make him kneel." Chapter 12. The Bait. The portal spat them out into silence. Gunner's boots hit the stone of the outer courtyard with a heavy finality. Behind him, Alpha stalked forward, ears high, muscles tense. The air smelled wrong, burned metal and dried blood. Ash floated lazily through fractured beams of twilight. Atherin, once proud, once defiant, now hung in ruin. The banners of the Triarchy were torn from their spires. One fluttered in the wind, soaked in something darker than war paint. Gunner's cybernetic arm flexed once. The runes along its length hummed with static energy, sensing nearby enchantments. And danger. "Stay sharp," he muttered to Alpha. The wolf gave a low growl in reply. They weren't alone. A figure emerged at the far end of the courtyard. A flicker in the shadows. Slow, deliberate, not afraid. She stepped into view like she was walking into a ballroom, not a battlefield. Syrien. Her long black coat drifted behind her like smoke, and madness hung around her like perfume. No armor, no weapons drawn, just confidence woven from chaos. At her side padded Sorvyn, the corrupted mirror of Alpha, hulking, silent, a beast of nightmares given form. His eyes met Alpha's, and the courtyard felt smaller. But Gunner didn't reach for Starbreaker, not yet. "I wondered if you'd come," she said softly. "Daddy said you would." Alpha snarled. Gunner stood tall. "Where are they?" His voice was cold steel. "Safe," she purred. "For now." From above, movement, a shuffling of boots, metal glinting. 3 figures were dragged out onto a high stone walkway, Lysandra, Nezra, and Velara, bruised, shackled, their dresses torn, their crowns gone, but their eyes, still sharp, still burning. Behind them, cultists stood ready, blades at throats. One of them held up a glowing object, Lysandra's talisman. Another raised the starlight dagger, the one Gunner had forged with Eli, the one he gave Lysandra after they defeated her father. Syrien's voice turned velvety. "You see, I know what you're carrying, that marvel of yours, forged with a star, blessed by blood, made to kill monsters like me. It's beautiful, really, and it would be such a shame if it was never tested." Gunner didn't move, but the muscle in his jaw clenched. "Let them go," he said. Syrien laughed. A soft chime-like sound, the laugh of someone who knew she'd already won. No, you came here to bargain, so... Bargain." She raised her hand and made a lazy circling motion in the air. From the rear of the courtyard, a cloaked cultist stepped forward, holding something wrapped in silk, an offering platform, ceremonial and black. "Place it there," Syrien said, nodding at the obsidian slab. "Lay Starbreaker down, and I'll consider sparing your little friends." Gunner's grip on the weapon tightened. Starbreaker's runes pulsed under his touch as if sensing the tension. It was a rifle of magic and war, crafted to destroy darkness. It was bonded to him. No one else could use it. But they could still steal it, break it, use it to torment. He looked up. Lysandra met his eye. No pleading, only resolve. "Don't," she mouthed. But he had to. If he didn't, they died here. He stepped forward slowly, lifted the rifle from his back, and walked toward the stone. Alpha growled, pacing beside him. "Easy," Gunner said softly. "This isn't over." He laid Starbreaker down. Its weight hit the slab with a dull clang. The courtyard held its breath. Syrien took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. The smile never left her lips. She reached for the weapon. It pulsed once under her touch, rejecting her, but she caressed it like a lover. "You just gave me your soul," she whispered. "And I didn't even have to touch you." And then, "You've made the right choice, Gunner. They'll live, for now." She gave a signal. The cultists yanked the sisters backward, disappearing into the tower. Syrien cradled Starbreaker, holding it up to the light. Oh, Eli did such beautiful work. I can't wait to see what it does when it breaks. She started to turn away. And Gunnar moved. Just a flick of his wrist, a shift in stance. The cybernetic arm locked. A hiss of compressed air and a shimmer of magic. The silver blade shot out with blinding speed. 12 inches of rune-etched death forged from the same core as the starlight gem, silent and unseen, until it was already too late. It slashed. Syrien shrieked and stumbled sideways, the tip of the blade slicing across her upper arm, not deep, but enough to spill blood and burn. Sorvyn lunged, but Alpha was faster, slamming into him with primal fury, the clash of corrupted beast and unbroken guardian echoing through the courtyard. Syrien clutched her arm, the blood on her fingers glowing faintly where the dagger touched her. She looked at it in shock, confusion. The blood burned. Not just her flesh, her soul. What was that? Her voice cracked, higher pitched. For the first time since arriving, genuine fear flickered behind her eyes. Something inside her recoiled. Ultranacious presence. Wavered, she screamed, whirling. Gunnar advanced, eyes cold. Insurance! The blade snapped back into his arm with a hiss. You didn't think I'd come here with just one weapon, did you? Syrian's smile twisted. Something unhinged flickered across her face. You sneaky, beautiful bastard. Then she laughed, a high, broken sound, not amused, unravelling. You tasted me, she whispered, staring at the blood on her hand. The blade tasted me. Oh, he's going to love that. Her voice dropped to barely audible. He felt it. He felt you cut him through me. Oh, he's going to love that. No, don't you dare blame me for I didn't know. She was arguing with the air again, but angrier now. Scared. She locked eyes with Gunnar, fury now, and fascination. You want to play, Wolf? Good. Let's make it hurt. The courtyard exploded into motion. Syrien lunged first. She moved like a whisper of flame, one hand weaving through the air, fingers glowing with searing red energy. The very stones beneath her feet cracked as magical pressure slammed outward. But there was something different now, a tremor in her magic, a hesitation that hadn't been there before. The silver blade had tasted her, and she could feel it. Burn! A torrent of flame surged toward Gunnar, but it wavered, the fire flickering like a candle in wind. He dived sideways, rolling to his feet as the weakened flames scorched past, barely singeing his coat. She followed with a second burst, but her aim was off. Wild. Desperate. Gunnar's cybernetic arm snapped forward, the starlight silver blade erupting from his wrist with a high-pitched hiss. He deflected the next bolt mid-air, sending it shattering harmlessly into the wall. You think I came unready? He growled, advancing. Syrian's smirk faltered. Heat swirled around her like a second skin, but it was thinner now. Unstable. No, Gunnar, she said, but her voice cracked slightly. I think you came angry. And I think you're scared, he thought, watching the way her hands trembled. 10 feet away, Alpha and Sorvyn collided with the fury of gods. Beast to beast, pure to corrupted, light against shadow. Alpha struck first, shoulders down, teeth bared, slamming into Sorvyn's side with bone-jarring force. The impact echoed like thunder. The corrupted wolf grunted and twisted mid-air, spectral claws dragging down Alpha's flank, leaving trails of frost and shadow. They rolled across the courtyard in a blur of fur, teeth, and otherworldly energy, howling and snarling, striking like the primal forces they represented. Every clash sent shockwaves through the stone. Alpha's jaws locked around Sorvyn's shoulder, real teeth meeting spectral flesh. Sorvyn let out a roar that sounded like screaming wind and raked his back leg across Alpha's stomach, trying to disembowel with claws that burned like ice. Blood sprayed. Alpha's real, Sorvyn's a strange glowing mist. Neither stopped, neither yielded. This was more than a fight. This was the corruption of everything Alpha represented. Made manifest, and hungry, for his destruction. Back to the duel. Gunnar rushed Syrien, closing the gap with deadly intent. She lifted her hand to cast, but he was already there, slamming his shoulder into her with the full weight of his fury. Her body hit a marble pillar, stone cracking behind her from the impact, but she laughed, high and broken. "You still hit like a hero," she gasped, blood trickling from her lip. She wrapped her hands around his arm, fingers glowing with dark light, absorbing the pain, feeding on it, and blasted him point-blank in the ribs with a pulse of corrupted magic. The force launched him across the courtyard. Gunnar skidded across stone, coughing up blood, agony blooming through his chest like fire. But he rolled to his knees before he'd even stopped sliding. The silver blade gleamed in his hand, thirsting. "I'm not here to save you," he said, voice like winter. "I'm here to end this." "Promises, promises," Syrien purred, but there was desperation creeping into her tone. She sent 3 jagged fire spears his way, wild, unfocused. He deflected one with the blade, its silver surface drinking the flame, dodged the second, took the third in his thigh, grunting as supernatural fire seared through muscle. He limped forward anyway, still coming. The wound only made him more dangerous. Meanwhile, Alpha and Sorvyn reached their breaking point. Alpha tackled Sorvyn into the ruins of a collapsed statue, marble exploding beneath them in a shower of dust and debris. Sorvyn bucked with inhuman strength, throwing Alpha off and slamming his massive paw down on the wolf's chest, pinning him against the broken stone. Their muzzles snapped inches apart, eyes locked, one burning with loyalty and love, the other with hunger and twisted purpose. Both wolves panted, breath ragged, blood and spectral mist mingling on the ground between them. Alpha growled, a sound of pure defiance. Sorvin's growl matched it, but his was hollow, echoing with the voices of the damned. One forged by devotion, the other by hate. They were equals, and that terrified them both. Gunnar charged again, not with brute force this time, but with the precision of a master killer. He feinted high, drawing Syrien's guard up, then stabbed low. The silver blade sliced deep across her thigh, parting cloth and flesh like they were made of paper. She shrieked, not just in pain, but in terror, because this time the blade bit deeper than skin. "You bleed for me, wolf," she screamed, but her voice was different now, layered, like 2 people screaming at once. She retaliated by grabbing his wrist, her fingers igniting with raw magical force. His cybernetic arm absorbed the assault, runes glowing brighter and brighter, but she held on with desperate strength. "Do you hear him?" she hissed, her grip tightening until metal began to warp. "Ultranacious is watching. He's here. He's inside me." "Then he can watch you fall," Gunnar snarled. With his free hand, he drove his forehead into her nose, a brutal headbutt that shattered cartilage with a wet crunch. She screamed, blood pouring down her face in crimson rivers, but she didn't fall. She laughed. But the laughter was wrong now, fractured, like a broken music box trying to play a song it could no longer remember. "You think you've seen crazy?" she gasped, blood bubbling on her lips. She raised both hands and the very air began to warp around them. Magic crackled like lightning, fire spiraled upward in impossible helixes. The stones beneath their feet started to melt. But just as she began to weave something terrible, something that would have torn reality apart, Alpha and Sorvyn crashed into them both in a tangle of fur, flesh, and supernatural fury. All 4 combatants slammed to the ground in a snarling, hissing mass of violence. And then something snapped. Not physically, something deeper. Syrien's scream cut off mid-breath. Her eyes went wide, not with rage, but with horror. The silver blade had found its mark again during the chaos, sliding between her ribs like a whisper of starlight. But this time, it hadn't just cut flesh. It had cut deeper. "No," she whispered, staring down at the blade embedded in her side. "No, no, no." Her magic began to unravel. The flames around her sputtered and died. The oppressive heat, that had surrounded her like a second skin evaporated into nothing. And in the sudden silence, they could all hear it, or rather the absence of it. The voice was gone. "Where are you?" she screamed at the empty air, clutching her head with both hands. "Don't leave me! Not now! Not now!" But Ultranacious's presence, which had wrapped around her like armour for so long, was severed, cut away by silver forged from starlight and quenched in divine fire. She was alone in her own head for the first time in decades, and she was terrified. Gunnar pulled himself to his feet, blood streaming from a dozen wounds, the silver blade still gleaming in his hand. "Now you know how it feels," he said quietly, "to face death without a god whispering in your ear." Syrien stumbled backward, magic flickering around her like a dying candle. She looked smaller now, mortal, breakable. "This isn't over," she whispered, but there was no conviction in it, no power. She raised a trembling hand, and a wall of black flame burst from the ground, but it was weak, pathetic compared to her earlier displays, more smoke than fire. When it cleared, she was gone. So was Sorvyn, but not in triumph, in defeat. Gunnar wiped blood from his mouth, tasting copper and victory. "Next time," he muttered to the empty air where she'd stood, "you don't walk away." Alpha limped to his side, panting heavily, his fur matted with blood both real and spectral, but his eyes were bright, unbroken. "Come on," Gunnar said, reaching down to steady his companion. "We finish this." But they both knew something had changed. The blade had done more than wound Syrien's body. It had severed her from the source of her power, and a Syrien without Ultranacious whispering in her ear was either much less dangerous or much more. Chapter 13. When Wolves Fall and Storms Rise. The courtyard was silent except for the scrape of Gunnar's boots against ancient stones. Starbreaker lay abandoned on the ground near the fountain, its runes still glowing faintly from the last exchange. Blood, his blood, dripped steadily onto the weathered stone beside it. The rifle was just out of reach, which meant Syrien had planned this moment perfectly. Alpha limped to his side, battered and bleeding from their first clash with Sorvyn. Smoke still curled from patches of his silver fur, where the spectral wolf's unnatural fire had burned him. His ribs heaved with each painful breath, but his golden eyes remained sharp, focused. Gunnar didn't hesitate. He reached down, gripped Starbreaker's familiar weight, and lifted it. The rifle's runes flared brighter as it recognized his touch. "Still here," he whispered, more to himself than to Alpha. But they weren't alone. From every corridor, every shadowed archway, every crack in the ancient walls, they emerged. Zealots in crimson robes, their faces hidden behind bone masks carved with Ultranacious's sigil. Weapons drawn, curved blades, spiked maces, staffs crackling with dark energy. Eyes glowing with the fervour of true believers, at least 30 of them, maybe more. Gunnar stood slowly, Starbreaker coming up to his shoulder. Alpha moved beside him, hackles raised, a low growl building in his chest. "You ready for this, partner?" Alpha's eyes met his. A moment of perfect understanding. Then they merged. Not physically merged. Something far deeper than flesh and bone, something that reached into the very essence of what they were. The change began as a whisper in Gunnar's mind, Alpha's consciousness touching his like warm fingers against cold glass. Then it deepened, expanded, became a river of shared experience flowing between them. Alpha's supernatural strength flooded into Gunnar's muscles, every fibre suddenly capable of inhuman speed and power. The wolf's enhanced senses crashed over him like a tide. He could smell the fierce sweat of every zealot, hear their individual heartbeats, feel the minute vibrations of their movements through the stone beneath his feet. It was overwhelming and perfect, all at once. Alpha's experience was equally profound. Gunnar's tactical intelligence poured into the wolf's mind like liquid fire, transforming instinct into strategy. Where once there had been raw predator fury, now there was calculated precision. He could see the battlefield not just as hunting ground, but as a chessboard. Every enemy position, every potential move, every weakness to exploit. It all crystallized with startling clarity. They were no longer man and wolf fighting side by side. They had become something new, one consciousness operating through two bodies, human cunning wedded to predator instinct in perfect synthesis. The zealots charged with fanatical screams, their weapons raised, their eyes blazing with religious fervor. Gunnar and Alpha moved as one. Starbreaker roared to life in Gunnar's hands, but now he fired with Alpha's supernatural reflexes, his movements fluid and predatory. Each shot found its mark with devastating precision, not just because of his training, but because he could sense his target's movements before they made them, smell their intentions in the air. Alpha struck like liquid death, every leap and bite guided by tactical awareness no natural wolf had ever possessed. He anticipated his enemies' attacks, exploited their blind spots, coordinated his movements with Gunnar's rifle fire in a deadly ballet that left no room for error. The first wave of zealots fell in seconds. A cultist with a spiked mace swung at Gunnar's head. Alpha was there instantly, jaws clamping down on the man's wrist with bone-crushing force while Gunnar pivoted and put 3 rounds centre mass into another attacker. The coordination was flawless, impossible, beautiful in its lethality. 2 more zealots rushed Alpha from different angles, curved blades gleaming. Gunnar's tactical awareness flowed through the wolf's mind, showing him exactly where to position himself. Alpha feinted left, drawing both attackers into Gunnar's line of fire, then rolled right as Starbreaker's enchanted rounds tore through both men. They were unstoppable, a force of nature given deadly purpose. But Syrien had been watching from the shadows above, her mad eyes tracking their every movement, learning their rhythm, their perfect synchronization. Beside her, Sorvyn crouched like a nightmare-made manifest, his spectral form allowing him to phase through the crumbling stonework, to position himself where no living creature could go. She waited until Gunnar was fully engaged with the main body of zealots, his attention focused forward. Alpha slightly separated as they worked to flank a group of spear-wielding cultists. Then she struck. The attack came from 2 directions simultaneously, a coordinated ambush designed specifically to shatter their greatest strength. Sorvyn dropped from a collapsed balcony like a falling star, his spectral claws extended. But these weren't ordinary claws. They cut through more than flesh, more than bone. They severed the spiritual bonds that held souls together. When they raked across Alpha's ribs, tearing through silver fur and muscle, they also tore at the mystical connection that linked him to Gunnar. In the same instant, Syrien unleashed a torrent of violet fire that seemed to burn reality itself. The flames weren't just hot, they were wrong, unnatural, designed to sear spirit as well as flesh. They washed over Alpha's flank, and the wolf's agonized howl carried more than physical pain. The spiritual merge that had made them invincible began to unravel. Gunnar felt it like a knife to the brain, Alpha's pain flooding through their shared consciousness, followed immediately by a horrible tearing sensation as their bond was forcibly severed. The wolf's borrowed strength abandoned his muscles, the enhanced senses faded to nothing, the perfect tactical awareness dissolved like smoke. Suddenly he was alone in his own head, diminished, hollow. Half his soul had been ripped away in an instant. Across the courtyard, Alpha collapsed, blood pooling beneath his silver fur, his breathing shallow and laboured. Alpha! The word tore from Gunnar's throat, raw with fear and rage, but Syrien was already moving. She flowed like liquid shadow, her movements predatory and graceful despite the madness burning in her eyes. Her boot caught Starbreaker just as Gunnar tried to bring it to bear, sending the rifle spinning across the blood-slicked stones. Before he could draw his sidearm, before he could even think to dodge, Her hand was at his throat. "Too slow without your puppy," she purred, her grip like iron wrapped in silk. "Not so magnificent now, are you?" She released him just long enough to catch Starbreaker as it bounced off the fountain's edge, hefting the enchanted weapon with mock appreciation. The rifle's runes responded to her touch, glowing faintly, not with acceptance but with barely contained rebellion. "I always wondered what this would feel like," she mused, turning the barrel toward him. All that power, all that precision. Gunnar McKinnon's legendary rifle. Her smile was sharp enough to cut glass. "I'm curious to see what it does when it breaks its favourite toy." Her finger found the trigger. The rifle bucked in her hands, not from firing, but from violent magical feedback. Electricity coursed through the weapon's frame, sending bolts of blue-white energy racing up her arms. She screamed and dropped Starbreaker, her hands smoking, the smell of burned flesh filling the air. "Fucking thing!" she snarled, shaking her singed fingers. "Loyal to the last, aren't you?" Gunnar's cybernetic arm whirred as the starlight blade began to extend. Sorvyn hit him like a freight train. The spectral wolf slammed into Gunnar's left side with bone-jarring force, his ethereal bulk driving him sideways into the fountain's edge. At the exact same moment, Syrien was already moving, the starlight dagger flashing in her hand as she struck with viper-quick precision. No words, no gloating, just brutal efficiency. The enchanted silver punched through his tactical vest like it was paper, sliding between his ribs with a wet sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Gunnar's breath left him in a shocked gasp, his cybernetic systems sparking as the blade's magic interfered with their circuits. Syrien and Sorvyn moved in perfect synchronization. Not the flawless unity that Gunnar and Alpha shared, but something rawer, more violent. Where the man and wolf fought as one consciousness, the woman and spectral beast fought as predators who had learned each other's rhythms through pain and madness. As Gunnar collapsed, Sorvin's jaws clamped down on his extended arm, spectral fangs sending jolts of numbing cold through the cybernetics. The starlight blade flickered and died, its systems overloaded. Syrien twisted the dagger deeper, her eyes wild with triumph. "This is the blade that killed my king," she hissed, her face inches from his as blood bubbled between his lips. "How fitting that it should send you to join him." She raised her free hand, violet fire beginning to dance between her fingers. That's when the sky exploded. That's when the sky exploded. Reality tore like fabric as the ancient portal stones blazed to life, their runes burning with power that made the air itself scream. The courtyard filled with impossible light as a gateway ripped open above them, revealing glimpses of distant stars and geometries that hurt to look at. Through that tear in space stepped Aeliana. She saw everything in one crystalline instant, Gunnar on the ground, the starlight dagger buried in his chest, blood spreading beneath him like spilled wine. Alpha motionless nearby. Syrien crouched over them both like a carrion queen. Behind her came the others, Clara and Omega materializing in a blur of motion, Darren's boots hitting stone as Thunderstruck roared to life, Jewel already reaching for her medical kit. But Aeliana's world had narrowed to a single point of absolute fury. "You?" The word carried the weight of divine judgment. She didn't gesture, didn't chant, didn't even think. She simply unleashed every ounce of power in her body. The courtyard erupted, raw magical force exploded outward like a nuclear blast made of starlight and rage. Ancient stones lifted from their foundations, the very air caught fire. Syrien barely had time to scream before the wave hit her, launching her across the courtyard to smash into the fortress wall with a wet crunch of breaking ribs. Sorvyn tried to phase away. The magical backlash caught him mid-transition, his spectral form flickering and solidifying at random intervals as he tumbled end over end through the rubble. The remaining zealots simply ceased to exist, vaporized in the flood of Aeliana's wrath. But she wasn't done. Aeliana rose into the air, surrounded by spinning rings of runic light, her hair whipping in winds that obeyed only her will. Power coursed through her like liquid lightning, decades of careful control shattered in a single moment of protective fury. Syrien tried to stand, blood streaming from her nose and mouth, her left arm hanging at an unnatural angle. She raised her hand, violet flames sputtering weakly between her fingers. Eliana's next strike shattered 3 of her ribs and sent her skidding across the broken stones. Sorvyn limped to his mistress's side, his spectral form bleeding wisps of otherworldly energy. Half his face had been seared away by the magical assault, revealing glimpses of the void beneath. "We... go," Syrien wheezed, blood frothing at her lips as Sorvyn helped her to her feet. But as they retreated toward the shadows, Sorvin's tail lashed out in one final act of spite, catching Starbreaker where it lay abandoned and smashing it against the fountain's edge. The rifle's stock cracked, its enchanted barrel warped beyond repair, runes flickering and dying like guttering candles. "This isn't over," Syrien gasped as they limped into the darkness. "Just the beginning." They vanished into the collapsing ruins, leaving only the echo of her broken laughter and the acrid smell of burned magic. Jewel was already at Gunner's side, her hands glowing with focused healing energy. "Don't you fucking move," she snapped. "That blade shifts, and it's going straight through your lung." Darren stood guard, thunderstruck, smoking in his hands as he swept the shadows for threats. "Well, this looks like it was a party. Sorry I'm late." And above them all, Eliana slowly descended, the light fading from her eyes as the reality of what she'd just done began to sink in. She had broken every protocol, violated every oath, and she didn't regret a single second of it. Chapter 14, Oaths and Ashes. The fighting was done, for now. Smoke curled into the air where once stood bastions of Atherin's pride. Broken towers, scorched stone, and the bodies of zealots littered the ground like fallen leaves. Their blood seeped into the ancient stones, and in the centre of it all, Gunner lay still. His chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, the torn fabric of his shirt stained with blood and sweat. The starlight dagger lay a few feet away, darkened from the blow it had dealt. Clara stood over him, watching, silent. Omega paced behind her, nervous, protective. Then Eliana arrived. Her armor was cracked, the hem of her cloak singed, and her usually calm expression was carved in something deeper, something raw. She didn't speak. She knelt beside him and laid her hand against his chest, above the closed wound Jewel had stabilized. Her magic flared. Not the precise, quiet magic of a guardian, but something deeper, older, unbound. "You shouldn't be here," Jewel said, wiping her hands on a bloodied towel. "You're burning too hot. You'll collapse." "I broke the oath," Eliana whispered. "I'm already burning." The runes along Gunner's skin began to pulse as her magic moved through him. His eyes fluttered open, barely. "You're glowing," he rasped. "You're bleeding." "We should stop doing this," he coughed. "The near-death thing." "Then stop nearly dying," she snapped. But her hand didn't leave his chest. Her other hand brushed his cheek. No one else spoke. No one else moved. Behind them, Echo Division medics flooded through the portal, barking orders, setting up triage lines, laying out tarps and gurneys across the blood-soaked field. Others from the 5077th Engineer Battalion arrived moments later, immediately integrating into the chaos with military precision. IVs sealants, biofoam, healing sigils. The courtyard of the once proud fortress had become a mobile hospital. But all of that, the urgency, the shouting, the chaos, faded behind the quiet moment between 2 war-torn souls. "You saved me," Gunner whispered. "Don't make me regret it," she said. Her power flared brighter, for a moment, too bright, and she winced. Jewel grabbed her shoulder. "You can't burn out, not here, not now." "Then take over," Eliana murmured. and she let go. Jewel immediately dropped in, finishing the stabilization. As she worked, she muttered, "Dumbass Alpha, dumbass Guardian. You two are going to get each other killed." A few yards away, Lysandra stood atop the steps, her hair singed, her coat tattered, but her posture regal. Valara and Nezra flanked her. The sisters were bruised, bloodied, and silent. They looked down at the wounded, at the battlefield, at Gunnar and Aeliana. And none of them said it, but the look was clear. War had come home, and it wasn't over. Chapter 15. Broken Ground, Bound Futures. The wind that swept through the ruined courtyard carried the scent of scorched stone and old blood. Medics moved quickly, disappearing one by one through the glowing portal. Gunnar had been the first, still breathing, but only just. Alpha beside him, his massive frame limp and torn, carried by a team of soldiers and healers who barely managed the weight. Jewel, blood on her sleeves and fire in her eyes, vanished behind them. Aeliana followed, glowing faintly still, drained but unwavering. Then the portal flared once and sealed shut. Clara stood alone on the battlefield. She turned toward the sisters, their silhouettes framed by the skeletal remains of their father's broken castle. Lysandra, Nezra, Valara, queens, heirs, daughters of a legacy soaked in conquest. They waited for her to speak, and when Clara did, her voice was colder than the wind that cut across the plateau. "Twice now. Twice in your realm we've had to carry our Alpha out in pieces." Her boots echoed on the blood-wet stone as she approached. "Other realms?" He walks out on his own, bruised, battered, maybe limping, but standing. "Only here does he bleed out on the floor?" Valara shifted uncomfortably. Nezra bristled. "He chose to come." Clara's stare snapped to her. "Yes, he did. He came because your people called for help, because your realm is tied to the rest of us whether you want to admit it or not." She stopped just feet away, the silver insignia of Echo Division stained with blood across her chest. "So now you need to choose. Are you going to keep treating this like it's your private war? Or are you going to stand with us before you lose this realm for good?" Lysandra finally spoke. "You're angry." "You're damn right I'm angry." Clara's voice didn't rise. It dropped lower, tighter. "Because while you sat on your thrones arguing who should lead, we bled for you. He bled for you. Again." A beat of silence. Clara let them feel it. Then she turned away, cold, efficient, and in command. "The Alliance will hold its next war council within the hour. If you're not there, we'll plan without you." And with that, she walked down the blood-stained steps, disappearing into the command tent, now rising from the ashes of Atherin. Behind her, the sisters said nothing, but the silence spoke louder than any oath.